Just so you know, to make sure you're in the right place, this is called Change with Perspective, using the gospel as a model, and it's really focused for those of you who are OCRs and or deal with course counsel. Some of the principles in the beginning can apply to everyone in leadership, but some of the details I'm going to talk about, and I tried to think about if I should make it for TGLs also, but that would make it like, oh, huge. So this is really focused for those of you that are OCRs. And course council members. And if that doesn't apply to you, I'm not offended if you get up and leave. That's no problem. But maybe someday you will be an OCR and you can look back at these slides. But I wanted to put that out there because I know there's a lot more TGLs here than OCRs. Okay. All right. So now that we've lost our TGLs, can I see by a raise of hand who in here serves as an OCR for their course? Do we have any instructional designers here? And do we have anyone that I'm not recognizing? AIMS, TGLs? Yep. Okay, great. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so just briefly so you know who's talking to you. Yeah. Okay, so I'm Julie Thompson. So I've been teaching online since 2009. I've been teaching for BYU-Idaho since 2012. I'm a biologist. And today I'm going to draw a little bit on organizational behavior research, but that is not my wheelhouse. So if anybody would like to pipe up and correct me for any of the organizational behavioral research I'm going to share, I'd be more than happy to have that. Okay, so I love how things work at BYU-Idaho. The whole time when I was working on this, I kept getting the thought, the Lord will help you. And I cannot believe how well some of the things that I'm going to share dovetail into our opening presentation. It's just amazing to see the work go forward. It's just a beautiful thing. So you are investing time in here. So just like we were asked earlier to think about the Spirit and what we need to hear, there are a lot of ideas in my presentation. So I would just like to invite you to think about what can you get out of your time investment here. Oh, and I have this handy pointer and I'm not using it, so let me do that. Okay, so I just got done with a road trip. I had this crazy idea to come to BYU-Idaho this year instead of fly, that I would drive. So I drove from Atlanta, Georgia here, and I know that it's important to have a road map. So I think that the court is making it so that it seems multimedia, right? So you're getting like little flashes and so it's like my multimedia. No, just kidding. Okay, so the roadmap for my presentation, I'm going to talk about reactions to change, how people deal with change as a variable, how to set priorities for changes, 4 principles that we can apply when changes are needed, and I'm going to mention some tools that you can adopt or suggest to adopt in your course councils for prioritizing and organizing. And I have this. Okay. All right. So why make changes in a course? Do any of these scenarios or situations sound familiar? So you can raise your hand if you want, make it a little interactive, or just to yourself. So is there a video in your course that has been pulled down by the makers and now it's, or I just heard of a case this morning that's changed and there was content added and a student sees it and they said, this video is not acceptable anymore. I can't believe BYU-Idaho has this. Okay, does that ever happen? Okay, is a course relatively old and needs to be updated? So it's running smoothly, but it's really old. Are you piloting a new course that needs improvements? Has a textbook come out that requires updating of a course? Are there assignments and activities that students don't understand? So there's a lack of scaffolding in the course. Does that happen? Are there content areas assessed, so in quizzes and exams that aren't taught or aren't taught well in the course content? So there's like this content gap between what's available and what's being assessed. Does your course have open source, open educational resources like OER type things that the links break or have broken or break often? Is the nature of your subject such that change is inherent? A lot of our IT fields, change is constant. Does that ever happen? Are instructors in your course offering a lot of great ideas to improve assignments? Any of those apply to anyone in here? Raise your hand. Oh, good. Okay, so change is here. So there are a myriad of reasons for improvements and changes that could be suggested. So what is your own reaction to change? What is the reaction to those that you serve with on a course council? There can be a spectrum of reactions as demonstrated by these emojis. So there can be a lot of, it's known that different personalities respond differently to changes, and actually there's quizzes in higher ed that you can rank your resiliency to change or your maybe unresiliency to change. So there's a paper called Intolerance of Ambiguity as a Personality Variable. And so there's a survey for higher ed. And I'm going to ask a few of the questions. So I want you to think about for yourself, rank yourself in like strongly agree to moderately agree to disagree to these statements. I would like to live in a foreign country for a while. What we are used to is always preferable to the unfamiliar. A good job is one where it's always clear what's to be done and how it's to be done. Many of our most important decisions are based on insufficient information. People who insist on a yes or no answer just don't know how complicated things really are. The sooner everyone acquires similar values and ideals, the better. A good teacher is one who makes you wonder about your way of looking at things. So there's different values on each one of those, but you can kind of tell that the way that you responded speaks to how you think about change. And in fact, here's a couple of quotes to point out to show reaction of change. So George O'Keeffe said, "Normal people don't like change. Most of us who think change is fun are consultants." On the other hand, Margaret Wheatley, who's an organizational behavioral person, she said, "People don't resist change. People change all the time. What people resist is having others impose change on them." So we're going to come back to that. And this is a paper which by Whitting, 2012, which sought to quantify how, in general, individuals and organizations react to change. And in general, individuals are mildly adverse, so they don't like change in general. In most organizations, that's true as well. Okay, so here's the big idea. So as I've been working with OCRs over the past year, there's lots of change for all those situations that we talked about, and I was really thinking a lot about the plan of salvation and the gospel, and those basic questions of like, why are we here and what are we doing? And my thought is that life gives us a lot of those same opportunities for change, and that the gospel could be a fundamental model that then we could use in our work. So normally we take everyday things and we make an analogy and then apply it to gospel principles. So here I'm going to take gospel principles and make an analogy for our work in course councils. So let's see if this works for anyone. I don't know. We'll see. This was my idea. So in the gospel, we could say that mortal life is a time for progress. It's a time to change. And we would say that we seek for consistent action. So I teach seminary, and I try to get my students to understand that those consistent small actions of daily prayer and daily scripture study are better than the reading for 24 hours straight in most cases. So we seek for consistent actions with what type of perspective? An eternal perspective. And that lens of an eternal perspective can really help us in those actions. And I think we also seek for balance and moderation. Some of the last talks in conference were talking about being moderate, even like in the way that we eat or whatever. So can we take this and then talk about it in our course council? So can we think about our course council service as a time to progress and change? Can we seek for consistent actions with perspective? And I'm going to ask you kind of what those perspective lenses might be in a course council, so that what you might put on how you make choices. And to have balance and moderation, because there can be a lot of changes, but that's not possible. So how can we balance and moderate change? I love this quote from Elder Eyring on accepting change. "Those who do not see their weaknesses do not progress. Your awareness of your weakness is a blessing." I love that, because who stands up and says, my weakness is a blessing, as it helps you remain humble and keeps you turning to the Savior. All right, so what are your perspective lenses? I would be glad to get some, we can make this interactive, some feedback here. How do you decide whether a change is crucial or not crucial in a course, or to suggest it to your course counsel? Obviously, you're not making the changes, but.
Well, I think first and foremost, how is it affecting the learning of your students?
Okay.
That's got to be number one always.
Okay.
How is their learning?
Okay, love that. How is student learning? Okay. Anyone else? Another lens that you think of?
I think sometimes you have to put aside your personal preference for how you wish things were, or take that into account that maybe that's the way you would like to do it the best, but maybe be open to that. I think sometimes that can be an issue with course leads and other instructors and things like that, that just the setup of how BYU-Idaho is and what changes are, I don't say this right, what changes are like that.
Should make a decided.
Preference-based,
or maybe just nice, and we'll talk about what I call the potholder syndrome with a quote from Elder Uchtdorf. But yeah, which ones are just kind of on the fringe and would be nice, but they're not maybe essential, or they maybe are just your preference. And one thing that kept, and I think it's what I needed to learn, I'm going to try not to get emotional, but the one thing that kept coming in my mind was check your pride at the door. So I think I can come in with ideas and it should be this way, but really if I can be humble, that's a great lens. Okay, anyone else? A lens for priorities?
So right now we're redesigning the course, and some of the things that we're both, I guess our course counsel is on board with, is giving the instructor more time to do things like teaching rather than grading discussion boards, and just giving more time to give them feedback and really dig into that.
And so to give instructors more time to dig in, the end result will be maybe an increase in learning, or probably student success will increase with that, and probably instructor enjoyment.
I think you could ask yourself, is my perspective data driven, or is it more personal preference driven? Because I see a definite spectrum of that, and we have so much more data available now. OCRs have so much more given to them now that you can really capitalize on.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. And we're actually going to talk about some of the data sources that we can use to set priorities. So I love that. All right, yeah, one more comment, Denny?
Well, we've had 3 semesters with just maintenance problems that are significant. But a bigger question really is what are the expectations for the course? And that's a twofold thing. One, what are the teaching objectives, and what are the proficiencies really required for these students? Because we don't believe, and I think most of us don't believe, the students are coming adequately prepared for our course. So it's a hard course. We always fail some people, always some drop out, and so we're struggling with that as a huge problem.
So that's, a curriculum, across the curriculum, but there could be scaffolding that you could add in but.
I've made some suggestions, and we've made some improvements, but this is a long discussion.
Yeah, sounds like it. And as you get in those nitty-gritty things, and I'm going to suggest some lenses, but first and foremost, what I love and why I teach for BYU-Idaho is this, the Spirit. I never thought, because of the nature of what I do in science especially, I was never really allowed to discuss the Spirit or anything in my teaching and my work, so it was like these two separate worlds. And now I've been able to just use the Spirit in my life. I mean, that's how it should be. Anyway, I love that. So principle 1, act under the direction of the Spirit. I can't emphasize this enough. There's only one slide, but if you remember anything else, remember that. We are fortunate to have been blessed with a special power to direct us in making important decisions between right and wrong. And I think that applies to our work here. Like we heard earlier, the Lord is aware of the work that we do, and He cares. Okay, so these are 3 things that I would like to suggest that can be used as perspective and priority lenses for course change. 1, support the university mission. If whatever change you're suggesting builds testimonies of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, it's important. 2, these are my suggestions. I'm Julie Thompson. Okay, number 2, does it help better meet course learning objectives. And I think that's what Kim was saying to begin with. Are the course learning objectives being better met by this change? And number 3, is student retention and success increasing by this change? So I decouple those, student retention and success and learning objectives. Some of us like to think of these as the same, but I think they're different because I think there are sometimes design decisions, the way that we aesthetically lay something out, maybe a multimedia thing, that where the course content is there and the course of learning objectives are there, but the way in which it allows students to stay in the class and be successful could be helped by some of those improvements. Okay, so take that for what you think might work. Okay, just to review, as we all know, but maybe there's some new OCRMs, the general course council pattern, we want to set up meetings. The course lead has stewardship over calling that, but there's no reason that anyone can't say, hey, when is our meeting going to be? Prioritize our agenda items. We're going to spend a lot of the rest of today talking, or today, next little bit. Don't worry, you're not going to be here for the rest of the day. Next little bit, prioritizing your agenda items, holding that meetings, communicating and coordinating, and then finally, I can't emphasize enough the follow through and follow up. And then we're going to repeat that cycle for the 9 semesters that were OCRs. Okay, so principle number 2, careful planning and pondering as a principle. So as you prioritize your agenda items, before you even get your agenda items, how do you keep track of the issues, ideas, improvements? Anybody want to offer? How do you keep track of all the ideas that you, because you'll think, oh, it'd be great if this, or instructors suggest something. How do you keep track of all of that?
I think the spreadsheet has always been a really good, helpful thing to me. Something to get yourself organized so you can keep kind of an idea of what is it that we've done, what are some ideas that people have suggested that that we might think about how to make things better, and kind of have an area for all of those kinds of things so that you can go back to it and see what it is that you might be suggesting.
That's great. So keeping lists all in one place, so a spreadsheet, keeping all those ideas. Collaborative community space. I know they're considering and they're looking at options now to change our community, but there are benefits of keeping a conversation in the community space, in that it builds a legacy that, so the work that you're doing, communicating and collaborating, is not lost. So I really would recommend using that, and collaborative options, even collaborative options with the spreadsheets. Google Drive docs are really useful. Okay, so record of collaboration and ideas. Using the online instructional community, I think it's this here that's, okay, I'm going to stay over here. That's why I have this. Okay, so what I mean by vested instructional team, when you communicate in the community or preferably emails, I know most of my OCRs that I have, 55 in my group, end up coming back to emails, but especially if we have a new tool, trying to keep that going in a community, what it can do is have an invested instructional team. It can help your instructors feel vested in your course, vested in the process, and those ideas can really come through. And I know that time is always a crucial thing for everyone. So being efficient and effective is a top priority. To think about how you can structure keeping all your lists in one place to be efficient and effective, because I know your time is very limited. And just a tip to be detailed and organized, and then that's easy to transfer to the next course council member. All right, so how do you prioritize your agenda items? We talked about some lenses, we'll reiterate those, but what information is available? So there, I think there's another session coming up on the data portal. I would really recommend, I'm going to talk about a couple of those things now, but the data portal talk, I would really recommend attending that to really get deep in what you can do that. Does anybody use the data portal for their course so far? A couple of you. Okay, so some things that you can find out from the course council data portal: final grade information going back multiple semesters, end of course survey information, enrollment and demographic information, final grade across sections of a course. And I will tell you that you can also compare data of the campus and online. So that is an important metric that is important, is to see how the campus counterpart, how things are being stacked up as far as success, student success. Okay, so comments analysis. Your course instructional designer can help you with that. This is from our course, from the course that I'm the OCR for in Bio 475. And so there's different comments that were added, and then they were put into categories to point out kind of major themes. And so especially major themes that students keep pointing out can be indications of, hey, we should really look at this and we should suggest some improvement here. There's other course metrics, and that's too small for you to see, but just to be aware, and again, I will recommend that you go to the data portal talk to get on that. But there's different metrics, and also this prep time. Someone was talking about allowing instructors more time, like making changes to the course, and so that metric can be useful there as well. And these are the one on this side are where students are asked to rank whether the objectives are clear, whether it was well organized, so really broad scale metrics
Really,
there.
You're
Yeah.
showing, if I'm understanding, is that saying that's the total amount of time spent per week in this particular course averages those averages?
You know, I don't want to speak out of turn. I think that is correct. So it says, it's really small. So Kristen, it says 6.1, 7.8, 7.5. But I don't have the y-axis, so I don't want to speak out of turn and say if it's like per credit hour.
I mean, I have one instructor who spends 15 to 20 hours a week in teaching, and he feels that's not fair, which is another discussion. But I'm wondering where we are with respect to standards. You know, we have a contract.
Yes.
But where do we sit as we look around the university? Are most instructors spending 12 hours a week? Are they spending 15? Are they spending 6?
So that's definitely that data is available, and I think your course council designer could help you with getting that. But definitely I think the goal is to have that contracted level of preparation time, the amount of time that you're contracted for, an instructor is contracted for. We want to try to shoot for ballpark around there. People can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
What's that?
is student time?
Oh, student time. Okay, that's student. I think you're right. Yeah, it says prep time, the approximate number of hours that I have spent outside preparation for this class. So that's right. There are metrics for instructor prep time as well. But that's right. That's for the students. So that's useful too. What's that?
And that's just self-reported. Right. That's not coming through the LMS. That's
Yeah, it's not from clicks and amount of time spent and all of that. This is just their survey and a course survey.
They're writing a paper, how it, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but I think the take-home point is that there is data that can drive those priorities when you're considering improvements. Yeah.
So, if anyone in here knows, has anyone thought about extending the time up past 9 hours in hour increments? Because for 3 credit courses, the 12 is still reasonable. Does that make sense?
The contract
I
time
think
is actually meant to be 3 to 4
4,
hours, right?
so it's the 9 to 12.
Anyway, so it could be up to 12 hours.
Okay, analyzing the student data, if they say, oh, I'm spending more than 9 hours, it's too much time. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Student hours,
I think
yeah.
for students it's still figured to be like the same.
it is.
Right, for my course, it would be helpful, because sometimes I'll have students who are like, I spend 15 hours on this course, so 9 doesn't always tell you whether it's too much, I guess, is the thing. If it's a 3 or 4 credit course, that's all. Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack.
No, not at all. That's the most important thing is that you get your questions and concerns.
Someone
That would definitely need to go back to your course council.
Okay, well, no, just the student evals. Because I've asked Scott Bergstrom before, is there any way we could ask, are you spending 10 hours or 11 or 12? That's all, just a university.
Oh, so you're saying that the survey caps out
The
at...
survey caps out at 9 hours.
Oh, yeah. So then that's kind of makes a biased estimate then. That's a great question.
Last time I
So that's a bigger issue of changing the survey. Okay, that's a great thing to note. So thank you. Appreciate that. But bottom line, it is important to think about, but also in that, I'll just add a little anecdote. A student said, oh, this is taking way too much time, but when I said this should take about 9 to 12 hours, you know, are you spending that? And then that was, because I think, yeah, so I think making that expectation can also help in some of that. Okay, but just to reiterate back to some of those priorities that you can use as lenses, just to ask it as a question. Use, does this increase testimonies of the restored gospel to decide if a particular item should have a high priority or a low priority or potentially be left off the list? Use the learning objectives, so your course should have learning objectives that are being met to decide if a particular item should have high or low priority. Ask the question, does this increase student success and or retention, to decide whether it should be left on or off the list. Okay, effective counseling. So this in my position as OCRM is what I get to think about a lot, and I don't know that I have any answers, but I definitely have some ideas and some questions, and I invite you to think about what would be useful for you in your situation. The number one thing, as I mentioned before, but I'll just reiterate it, that I hear from course leads, from course designers, and from OCRs is I don't have time. Time seems to be the premium, so it would behoove us, I think, to ask ourselves, even maybe in a course council meeting, ask the question, how can our course council be more effective and efficient? And if we can add in some sorts of systems that can help us be more effective and efficient, then maybe we can do the things that we want to do.
My experience, and I wonder if this is true, is the course, the design seems to be the most limited for time. The course lead and I and the other people teaching it, we spend much more time than we see the course design people spending. And then things are postponed, and I think sometimes we just don't go to them because we'll do it ourselves.
Yeah, I think that the course, we really want to embrace the course council, and I think that what my perspective, just working with 55 courses that I work with, is that it's across the board. So for as far as time constraints and the particular situation, so I think that's definitely happens in some other courses, but not all other courses. And so, but I definitely would, the course council is there for a reason, and so I would circle in that designer back in and maybe decide what needs to happen and what doesn't need to happen.
Suggest they need more time.
Yes, and I think that they, that's definitely there.
Would be another thing.
Yes, yes, and I think definitely those things are being addressed as well. It's new.
Yeah.
Right, in their portfolios, sure.
I have so much to do, and they're like, let's talk about that in 3 semesters. And you're like,
Yeah.
Yes, and I think they're being addressed as well as possible, but I think that's even more reason to point back to keeping our efficient, because I've noticed that with myself, keeping very detailed, or I haven't been always as detailed and organized as I need to, and then when I go back, when there's time in the schedule, it's harder. So I think that helps. A thing that we have control over that we can do as OCRs is to be detailed in what our ideas are and improvements and when the time is available, and because there's so many moving pieces as far as what courses, the level of need that they have to fix different issues. So, but I fully understand. Yeah,
I would say one thing that helped us when I was the OCR in our course council in this new design is there would be not enough time during the meeting to talk about it, so we would continue that conversation in a group email so that we would still be able to express those ideas and concerns and have them reply back, having a chance to, look it over and talk about it. And that seemed to work for us and when we had time constraints like that.
That's great. Yes.
Oh, no, I don't want to interrupt because I'm
Okay.
going on a different.
Okay, different tangent. Okay, and I'll go back to some kind of ideas that I'd like to propose, but I wanted to jump on what Debbie was saying, and I would definitely recommend, my course council designer has been excellent in setting up a collaborative process. If you have a collaborative process, I would definitely think about using it. And here are some potential things that you can add to those. So the idea from what Debbie was saying is to extend the conversation and that can be efficient. So if you're keeping track of these ideas, so there's an idea, but then to have categories in there is how as a course counselor are you ranking them? So what's the priority rank? What's the impact on the learning objectives? What's the impact on student retention? How much time is it going to take? And then what would the action items be? And if all of that is captured in here, then it can work really well. And I have this kind of little model that I came up with. So for some types of things so some things are game stoppers. They're emergencies. They need to get fixed. Some things will improve the course. So that's part of what the priority, the ranking that you'll do in the spreadsheet. But always in the back of your mind, if you think about the amount of effort and the outcome. So really the things that can be implemented in most cases are things that don't have a ton, that can be done quickly and have a high impact either on student success, on learning objectives, on building testimonies, things like that. So things that obviously don't that have a high degree of effort and have low impact or low priority probably won't get implemented. They can still be part of our collaborative document and ideas, but we're not going to implement everything. Okay. Yeah, were there comments that folks wanted to talk about? And then I'm going to go back a little bit.
I was going to go a little bit on a tangent just because, I'm a fairly new OCR. Last semester was my first semester. And what I didn't know until almost the end of the semester, which I wish I had known right up front, is the load that the course designers have.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had no idea that they have so many courses that they're managing. And so that changed my whole perspective of how to communicate, how to track things, what I can do on, as an
Yes.
OCR. Because in my mind, when I, first started as OCR, I thought, they have 3-4 courses that they're managing. And so then, of course, your expectation is completely different when you realize, oh, no, that is not how it is at all. And I think that's, those are the things that can be communicated in either just training or up front so that the expectations are set, because I think that has a huge impact on communication.
That's great. I really appreciate that. And an impact in communication and expectation, and so there's not undue expectations. Because I think their portfolios are around 60. Yeah, 60 courses. So, and you're thinking about intimate design details.
Regular design projects. We do more than just manage the 60 courses. We have regular design projects.
Sorry, but that's crazy.
Tell me that.
No.
But so this will be a great point to jump in here and talk about effective communication, I think. So I wanted to talk about effective communication because I see that as a potential place that we could all learn. And so from a theoretical standpoint, we know organizational behavioral research shows that the vital importance of communication in the change process has been empirically demonstrated and generally agreed upon. But we also know that that if we're going to lead like the Savior, communication is really important. And I was thinking about an example, and the talk from April conference, I have it in here, but he talks about the young rich, was it Elder Eyring? It talks about the young rich man and what he was invited to do. So in that conversation, it's a direct communication with an invitation, with kindness in the spirit. So I've been thinking a lot about that, about if I am communicating directly, and even maybe recognizing some of my assumptions to make sure that I'm not assuming things. So communicating directly, but with kindness and the spirit. And so I'm going to take a step onto that. And so when we talked about this spectrum of change and how we deal with it, and that what people resist is having others impose change upon them. So the Lead Like the Savior journey really is to counsel together, and there's quite a few. Something that's really been on my mind a lot lately is I received a comment from a new OCR that said, I understand the course counsel process, but it's just so inefficient. And I think that as we counsel together and we're able to do some of the things that we're talking about and we're led by the Spirit, that it can be a powerful process. And one thought I had was for myself is, do we invite, or am I more trying to compel? So I think there's a difference. I think that if I'm acting in kind of lead like the Savior way, that I would invite some of these changes with questions and things like that. And then, just like the story of the young rich man, be willing to do hard things. And that's definitely what we learned in the session today with the children of Israel crossing the Jordan River. They got their feet wet first. So are we willing to do hard things? Okay, did I have any more comments there? Okay, so collaborative course council process, yes.
So designers are very overburdened, right? Have we thought about maybe giving more design control to OCRs? Like letting them do you know what I mean? Having designers more like, do you know what I like? Not all OCRs are as computer functioning ready, but
Yeah, but I think also OCR contracts, if OCR stayed within their contract limits, it's pretty limited as well. But there is in place, and those of you who know can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is in place, you can work with your course council designer, and they can provide you what's called in-time training just in time, that's what's called, yeah, just in time training, and then you can have limited access to do particular things that is agreed on by your course council. So that is an option as you discuss it with your course council to do some implementation of things, depending on your situation. So I don't want to overstep what I'm able to talk about. So really, the other thing that I need to say is that my interest and my hats is design, but really OCRs are their main focus should be gathering information from instructors and their experience and bringing that to the course council. That's the main job, is to be the voice of the online instructor. You see on the ground how that online pedagogy is working or not working, and so you're bringing that voice to the council. So that's, I think, how we should think about that. Although I have a lot of interest in these things and being really active, and Kristen knows that I'm all into this, but really take a step back and say, you know, am I representing that online perspective? And that's my main job. And then, but secondarily, to help out in design, and there's different cases where there's a development contract that's issued for specific projects. But definitely, I always point, my job really as an OCRM is to point back to that course council and to really get it to just move and flow and be beautiful. Okay. Yes?
Quickly add that our course has lots of changes, and so we've received help from online course support with students who are really becoming familiar with our course. And I think that's really helped the designers.
That's great. And that also reiterates the need to use tickets, like use tickets, keep track of things and use ticket system. So, because then course support can help, right, with those student things, if it's a technology issue or things like that.
And the new setup on that is really nice too. You can see the progress and they can answer questions and stuff.
Yeah, they're making a lot of transitions there. Okay, so as we're thinking about these things, balancing that, we've already kind of touched on that. This is what I call the potholder pitfall. So in a talk that Elder Uchtdorf talked about, am I committing my time and energy to the things that matter most? There are so many good things to do, but we can't do all of them. Our Heavenly Father is most pleased when we sacrifice something good for something far greater with an eternal perspective. And why I call it the potholder pitfall is that he's talking about maybe it's not the best use of your time if you're teaching Relief Society to hand crochet a potholder for each individual student. So thinking about some of those things, like, oh yeah, it would be nice, but you know, let's focus and balance with moderation. Okay, so follow through and follow up. So you've had this amazing course council meeting, everybody's on board, you've set priorities, and hopefully if you haven't had time either collaboratively on an online doc or something, you have an action plan. And so the need to follow through and follow up is just crucial. And I know that as the emails from students come in, or if you're also, a lot of OCRs are also TGLs, and emails from instructors come in, and so then you're like, my development, or what I'm doing for my course council, what I said I would do is not getting done. So two things that I'd like to suggest, and it goes perfectly with what we learned this morning, small incremental pieces. I love that from this morning, and that fits perfectly. If we have consistent scheduled time, blocking off time that's like, boom, this is my OCR 1 hour this week, and I'm going to focus, because I guarantee, I don't know if anyone else has this situation, the emails will come, right? And then also, so if you have that time blocked away and you stick to that, then you're able to make those small incremental things, and you're able to follow through and get done what needs to get done. Communicating with the instructors in the community, updating things on a collaborative document, whatever it is in your OCR responsibilities can get done. And then consistent, efficient communication. Sometimes it's easy to have a course council meeting and then, whew, all right, now to the, but checking back in with the emails so that that follow-up gets through, because really what we want is the implementation of the final thing, not just planning, because we can plan and plan and plan, but we need to figure out how to communicate efficiently with our course council. Does anyone have any suggestions on how you communicate with your course council members effectively and efficiently? Is it mostly email? Does anyone use collaborative documents? Suggestions? Did you have, you were nodding your head, yeah?
I was just saying email. Maybe I'm just really lucky, but when I first started as an OCR and I talked with my lead teacher who teaches here on campus, he just gave me such great power to really be so involved in the course and make decisions that I felt needed to happen. Not, big huge change to the course, but giving me that power, and he told me, address each situation with mercy when you're thinking about students and maybe something is difficult or challenging. And I saw that we had an exam this week, and 3 of the questions were not at all addressed in the course, and I didn't catch that last semester. And I thought, oh crud, this is really not good. But he gave me the power to say, we can throw this out or work around it, and it just made me less stressed about any little things that maybe popped up that were inconsistent or incorrect. And then I could just address that when I did my videos or something. And so, I think just if we build that good relationship with our course council, we maybe won't get dragged down by some things that are out of our hands and that are out of theirs. I mean, we all have so much to do. And if we just remember that the Lord is merciful with us, then maybe we can be more merciful with our council.
Yes, I like that you've built a good relationship. So, the theme for this conference is connections, and there's so many opportunities we have, even as we're in different parts of the United States or whatever, there are opportunities to make those connections, to build courses and to teach courses that benefit our students. Definitely, I really appreciate that example. Yes?
I think one advantage of being in the OCR is to be able to get and have conversations with the course lead and see where their perspective is coming on, why they're teaching the way they're teaching, why they put different things in the course. And it's really helpful to give feedback based on that and to improve the course if you can get on that same page and maybe communicate those things to other instructors or encourage those things to be put in the notes from instructors.
Yes. Oh, I appreciate it. So many things that you said. Definitely making sure that things are recorded in the notes for instructors is essential, and especially any insight you've gleaned from the course lead, that can be represented in how the course should be taught. And then also a two-way communication, because most course leads, and definitely the course lead that I work with it admits that they are not, they've never taught online. So there's a two-way thing to say, okay, in an online world, how could we, maybe tweak this a little bit or think about this? So there's that two-way interaction on meeting those lesson objectives. So I really appreciate that. Okay, so what we started here, what is one thing that you'll apply from your time here? So think about through, I had a smattering of ideas and things. What is one thing that you could take away and do? And I would like to end, and then take any questions or suggest afterwards, with a road forward. So accepting and viewing change with a proper perspective, that change is going to happen, and to realize how we personally react to it and how maybe other members of our course council react to it, so we can be understanding in those interactions. Principle 1, act under the direction of the Spirit. Principle 2, careful planning and pondering. 3, effective counseling. 4, follow through and follow up. And then what tools might you use for prioritizing and organizing? And then finally, I'd just like to say that I think the benefits of implementing these tools and principles are accomplishing the work and building a legacy of work. So all the time and effort and sweat and tears that you put in and all your instructors are giving to you can be passed on, and it can benefit ultimately students in their learning, and that it can build those connections that you'll have for a long time. So thank you for being here, and I'll take any questions. So. Oh, and then I have this. Yes.
So mine is more, what would be considered an old course? Like how do you decide if your course needs like a full revamp?
Definitely if material, and I'll call on people that know more than I, like Kristen, but I think if the course is has content that's actually incorrect, like if it's old, like we had a few things that because science changes all the time, so we had some facts on some things that are outdated. That's one thing to do. Sometimes, I would say definitely if it's old and not what's currently in the practice. So and your course lead could have a conversation because they're considered the subject matter expert, and you could have a conversation about the relevancy of some parts of that. If technologically they're old and maybe aren't functioning as well, would be another reason that you would consider a course old. Do you have any other ideas of what you would consider old?
Well, what you already mentioned, yes, is important. But also I would consider if there's misalignment. Sometimes we have kind of two problems with courses. One is that like there's limited time when it was designed initially, and then there's what I call course creep, where there's just like all kinds of little changes that get made over time, and the course is no longer cohesive. So that could apply in a lot of different ways, but probably the most alarming way would be if it's resulted in misalignment between the materials that are presented and the assessments that the students are required to do. So that would be a definite flag for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so looking at those learning objectives, and if there's content that's not being presented that's being assessed, so if that's disjunct, that's definitely a flag, is what Kristen's saying. Yeah, any other questions? Yes, sir.
This goes back, and I probably should know the answer to this, but in the course council, who is really responsible for initiating the meeting and actually basically, shall we say, providing the guidance in the development of that agenda? Is that the course lead's responsibility, the OCR's lead, or is it the designer's lead?
So definitely I would turn you back to the online handbook, which is written very well. It does say that, in its specific language, and they try to not say a particular like responsibility for the course lead, but they think, I can't remember the language that the course handbook leads, but the course lead that the online handbook uses, but it does say that the course lead will call the meeting. That is, but in practice, we know that sometimes we just all need to say, hey, let's have a meeting, and what are your agenda items, and work together. That's, I think, in reality.
Ours has worked all the time, but
yeah.
I've had a little mystery going on in the back of my mind.
Yeah, the course lead should say, hey, let's have a course council meeting, but I think everyone can. Okay, thank you.